Welcome to Global Watch. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. Good evening. Tonight, we bring you a story that will reverberate through every corner of the nation and beyond. In a move that has sent shockwaves through the world of American economic policy, the Supreme Court has struck down President Trump's sweeping America First global tariff plan. This is not just a legal decision, it's a moment that will reshape the economic landscape for years to come. The ruling doesn't simply rewrite the rules of international trade, it has ignited a fierce political battle, triggered wild swings in the financial markets, and raised urgent questions about the limits of presidential authority in times of crisis. Today's decision stands as a dramatic rebuke of the president's use of emergency powers to impose tariffs, challenging the very foundation of executive action in economic affairs. For months, American businesses have shouldered billions in extra costs, while supply chains have been thrown into disarray, all under a legal authority now deemed unconstitutional. The ripple effects are being felt from factory floors to boardrooms across the country. President Trump, who warned that a defeat would destroy the United States, now faces the daunting challenge of dismantling a policy that has become deeply woven into the fabric of the American economy. His supporters are rallying, while critics see an opportunity for change. At the heart of this crisis lies a fundamental question: just how far can a president go in the name of national security and economic protection? The answer will shape the balance of power for generations. Tonight, we'll break down the legal journey that led to this historic moment, examine President Trump's response, and explore the economic fallout, including the staggering prospect of up to $150 billion in potential refunds to businesses. We'll also look ahead to what this means for the future of American trade and global relations. The chaos has erupted, uncertainty hangs in the air, and the story of America's economic fortress under siege is only just beginning. Stay with us as we unravel the implications of this unprecedented decision. The tariffs began with a promise: America First. This slogan wasn't just a campaign catchphrase, it became the guiding principle of a sweeping new economic agenda. The idea was simple but bold: put American workers, industries, and interests at the center of every policy decision, no matter the global consequences. President Trump vowed to rebalance global trade, claiming decades of bad deals had hollowed out U.S. manufacturing. He argued that American factories had closed, jobs had vanished, and entire communities had suffered because previous leaders failed to stand up to foreign competitors. His tool: sweeping tariffs, making imports more expensive and using economic pressure to force new trade deals. These tariffs targeted steel, aluminum, and a wide range of goods from China and other countries, aiming to level the playing field for American producers. To move fast, Trump declared a national economic emergency, unlocking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA. This rarely used law gave the president extraordinary authority to act unilaterally in the name of national security. Originally meant for sanctioning rogue states, IEEPA became the engine for a massive trade overhaul. It allowed the administration to bypass the usual checks and balances, raising questions about the limits of executive power. The administration imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions in goods, bypassing Congress. This was an unprecedented use of emergency powers in the context of trade, and it sent shockwaves through global markets. The gamble: that courts would endorse this broad interpretation of presidential power. Legal scholars and lawmakers alike debated whether such sweeping authority was ever intended by Congress. The impact was immediate: $165 billion in tariff revenue in 1 year, with projections of up to $400 billion annually. The tariffs became a major source of government income, but also a flashpoint in the global economy. The White House touted new deals with the EU and Japan as proof the strategy worked. Officials pointed to renegotiated agreements and claimed America was finally getting a fair shake on the world stage. But costs soared for U.S. businesses and consumers, and farmers faced retaliation abroad. Many American companies struggled with higher prices for materials, while agricultural exports were hit by foreign tariffs in response. A coalition of affected businesses challenged the president's authority, arguing he'd stretched emergency powers beyond recognition and usurped Congress's role. They warned that unchecked executive action could set a dangerous precedent for future administrations. This set the stage for a monumental legal showdown. The courts would now have to decide whether the president's actions were justified or if they crossed a constitutional line. The stakes: nothing less than the very definition of presidential power over trade, and the future balance between Congress and the White House in shaping America's economic destiny. The legal fight began in the U.S. Court of International Trade, a specialized federal court in New York City that handles complex disputes over tariffs, trade, and customs. It was here that the first shots were fired in a battle that would soon grip the nation's attention. Thousands of American companies, from small importers to major corporations, joined forces to challenge the Trump administration's sweeping tariffs. They argued that the president had overstepped his legal authority, putting their businesses and the broader economy at risk. Their central argument was clear: the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or EEPA, was never intended to be used for peacetime economic policy. According to them, the Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to regulate trade and impose taxes. The administration, however, insisted that urgent action was needed to protect America's economic security, citing threats from abroad and the need for swift executive action in a rapidly changing global market. In a major victory for the business community, the lower courts sided with the companies. Judges ruled that President Trump had exceeded the authority granted by IEPA, setting a powerful legal precedent. The government quickly appealed, determined to defend the president's actions. But the appellate court upheld the lower court's decision, declaring that emergency powers are not limitless and cannot override the laws passed by Congress to regulate trade. Yet, not all judges agreed. In a strongly worded dissent, one judge argued that the president's powers under IEPA were virtually unlimited in times of declared emergency, an argument that fueled the administration's push for Supreme Court review. The case now became a defining test of the separation of powers. The Federal Circuit, recognizing the gravity of the issue, delayed its final ruling to allow the Supreme Court to weigh in on this historic dispute. Fast-tracked to the nation's highest court, the case drew intense national attention. News outlets covered every development, and legal experts across the country debated whether the court would ultimately strike down the tariffs. At stake was not just the legality of the tariffs, but the very nature of presidential power in the modern era. How far a president can go in the name of national security and economic protection. The 9 Supreme Court justices, including 3 appointed by President Trump himself, now faced a momentous decision, one that could define the balance of power between Congress and the White House for generations to come. The stakes could not be higher, as the outcome would shape the future of American governance and the limits of executive authority. Today, the Supreme Court delivered its answer. In a 6-3 decision, the court struck down Trump's global tariff plan, affirming Congress's authority over trade. Chief Justice Roberts wrote, "IEPA can't be used for a sweeping, long-term tariff regime that overrides Congress's trade laws." The court found that while the president has broad emergency powers, they don't allow him to create a parallel system of taxation and trade regulation. The dissent argued the majority was overstepping, warning the ruling would hamstring future presidents in economic crises. The timing, on the first day of the new term, underscored the case's significance. The immediate effect, the legal authority for most tariffs, vanished, and the government must now deal with the fallout of an unlawful policy. The era of unilateral, emergency-based tariffs is over. The White House reaction was swift and furious. President Trump blasted the ruling on social media, calling it a disgraceful attack on American sovereignty and accusing the justices of betraying the nation. At a press conference, he declared the decision a catastrophe, claiming it would empower America's enemies and devastate the economy. Trump's allies echoed his outrage, framing the court as activist and out of touch with the American people. Some called for curbing the court's power, a sign of deepening political polarization. Behind the scenes, the administration scrambled for alternatives, but with IEPA off the table, options are limited. The loss of this tool is a genuine crisis for Trump's trade agenda. The political and legal battle is far from over. The economic fallout is immediate and staggering. With $165 billion in tariffs collected now voided, U.S. businesses could be eligible for up to $150 billion in refunds, a historic fiscal reversal. For thousands of companies, it's a victory relief from tariffs and a potential cash windfall. But the refund process will be complex and slow, creating administrative chaos. Wall Street cheered, but the administration's main leverage for trade deals is gone. U.S. trade policy must now revert to slower, traditional methods, sectoral tariffs and painstaking negotiations. Companies that restructured supply chains now face new uncertainty. The end of tariffs brings relief but also economic whiplash. The shockwaves will ripple through the economy for months to come. This ruling is about more than tariffs. It's a defining moment for the separation of powers. Legal experts say the court reaffirmed that only Congress can write economic laws, not the president via emergency powers. The majority feared a precedent where future presidents could use emergencies to control the economy unchecked. The decision is a classic check on executive overreach, restoring the balance of power. The White House's reliance on IEPA proved a shaky foundation. When struck down, the whole policy collapsed. The president still has tools to address unfair trade, but can't bypass Congress for sweeping changes. The lesson: major policy requires legislative buy-in, not executive shortcuts. The decision sent shockwaves worldwide. U.S. allies in Europe and Asia welcomed a return to predictable, rules-based trade, hoping for less confrontation. Retaliatory tariffs may now be lifted, boosting U.S. exporters. The ruling is seen as a win for multilateralism and a blow to economic nationalism. China, meanwhile, sees validation for its criticism of U.S. tariffs, but the loss of American leverage changes the dynamic. The administration must now rely on diplomacy and alliances to counter China. Globally, the ruling forces every nation to reassess its relationship with a newly constrained U.S. trade policy. Tonight, the Supreme Court has redrawn the boundaries of presidential power. Trump's global tariff plan is gone, replaced by chaos and uncertainty in Washington and beyond. The administration must now return to the slow work of legislation and diplomacy. For businesses, the ruling brings relief and refunds, but also the pain of years of costly adjustments. The court's decision signals a new era, one where executive power faces real limits. The aftershocks will define American politics, the economy, and global relations for years. We'll continue to follow every development as this story unfolds. Thank you for watching. Stay informed.